Behind most sort of things, there is a very human dimension. Managers, in my experience, fear two things: losing control or losing face. And if you can overcome those fears, you can become exceptional. He sort of looked at me and said, I guess I've got to learn how to do the CEO job better. And I said, yeah, I think so. Do you want some help with that? So that was the beginning of our working relationship, and acknowledgement that if he carries on the way he is currently leading the business, it's going to fail. So if you spend 90 or 100% of your time just living in that world, you're just living on borrowed time. One of the exercises I often do with CEOs is to compare your diary with your vision. And it's a very crude metric, but when you do that, there's a remarkable amount of mismatch that usually occurs. Running your own business and not having investors, love that. The only pressure you experience is the pressure you put on yourself.
Welcome back to the Growth Under Pressure podcast, sponsored by Adapt CFO. I'm your host, Eric Josovitz. A lot of founders do not break because the business is failing. They break because the business is working, growing, and demanding a different version of them faster than they are ready for. Simon Cord is with us today. He's a leadership coach, author of Founder's Legacy, right here, awesome book, and co-founder of Value Partnership. Over more than 25 years, he has coached founders and CEOs across Europe and beyond, including leaders at Miniclip, Tipico, as those businesses scale to unicorn level outcomes. Simon, great to have you here.
Yeah, nice to be here, Eric.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Let's start with, what does a leadership coach do exactly?
It's a good question. Let's hope I've got a good answer, given I've been doing it for 25 years or so. So I think what is most important about coaching is that at the end of that process, the leader is more effective, more impactful, healthier, knows him or herself more deeply, and can take their business on a journey that is truly worthwhile from their own personal point of view, particularly if they're founders, but also from a shareholder or investor's point of view, and turns their business into something that has real sustainability. I mean, that's why, in a way, the book was called Founder's Legacy, because I really believe in helping to build businesses that will kind of stand the test of time and are not vulnerable to, being outcompeted or decline. So, yeah. So just one more thing about coaching. It's probably worth, because I'm not sure everybody gets this. I think some people think coaching is sort of based on a football model or something, where I'm going to scream at you if you don't do what was in the game plan. It's definitely not that. And at the other extreme, I think there are people who think that it's kind of like therapy, that I'm going to stand just out of your line of sight while you lie there and I sort of say things like, tell me more, and don't actually tell you anything. And it's not that either. So coaching kind of sits in the middle, and it's really all about helping that individual figure out who they are, understand their individual qualities, what makes them a leader, and helping them to put that into practice. Because without personal change or real business change, we're not really doing very much. I have a very, very particular sort of mindset around this, because a lot of coaching is done neutrally. In other words, I never advise. I only ask questions to help you gain insight into yourself or your business or the challenges you face. And after 25 or 30 years, I can't sit on the sidelines like that. I have a view. I've seen things before. I'm old enough and I've got enough experience and hopefully a little bit of wisdom. And so I will be quite challenging with my clients, because I don't think you perform unless you get support and challenge. So I start to bring ideas, I start to bring other perspectives into the conversation, which I think is an important part of it.
Yeah. And I remember in your book, it talks about, I think 25 to 35, somewhere in that range is where most of the successful founders are. And after your 40s, that's when the knowledge comes into play. So of course, sharing that knowledge and being a sounding board, it sounds like that's that's what you're doing, and you're guiding them to the decision. You're navigating them. And is it true to say that understanding what the impact they want to have in their life and with the business is a big part of what they do, helping them understand that?
It's so varied. And I currently coaching a young man who's in his early 20s. It's an AI startup. It's got a mental valuation, given it doesn't have any revenue to speak of yet. And he is super bright. He's got next level fluid intelligence, but he's got almost no experience of building a team or dealing with investors or figuring out strategy. So what I have to help him with, and you can sort of imagine the kind of conversations we're having, is a world apart from some of the conversations I have with people who sort of later in life, more experienced business people, but they're struggling with scale, they're struggling with quite complex strategy problems, or their business is flatlined and they haven't really figured out why, or they haven't figured out how to get the best out of their team. So the variety is part of the challenge and part of the stimulation, frankly, for me as a coach. You consider all the variables: gender, nationality, culture, language, stage of business growth. It's that variety that makes it very stimulating for me as a coach. And in every case, it's about getting to know that person, building enough trust and confidence in the relationship that they can be completely honest with me. And it's in that honesty and the trust that that's based on that really good work happens. I kind of know that I'm going to be helpful to somebody when they say something to me along the lines of, I don't know what to do, Simon. I've tried everything I can think of. I need help. A lot of people struggle to say things like that. And I think men struggle more than women to say things like that. But in those moments, their readiness to kind of open up to alternatives and to try different things. We have the beginnings of personal change and then business change. And it's right to say that a lot of this is about, it's not just about, particularly with founders, it's not just about a business that performs well. It's about them growing and being able to continue to build that business long after the coaching relationship is over.
Yeah, with Tipico, you had a situation where you actually brought in you helped guide them to bring in another leader, CEO. Have you had any clients that came to you for coaching and you actually told them you're not going to be a good leader? There's nothing I can do to help you.
It's interesting because, just because of the last 10 years or so, I coached mostly founders. There are quite a few people who are not in that sort of founder CEO category. And just creating a business took leadership, right? So it comes back to this question of what do we mean by leadership? For me, it starts with a vision of something that's not there now. It's one of the things that founders would recognize as a definition, I think, but because I think a lot of people conflate leadership with management. It's about dealing with people and they don't enjoy that, or they treat it in a very binary way. It's like someone like Elon does. If you don't have the right skills at the right time, he's not interested in you.
Yep.
That's not leadership, or it's a very particular form of it. I shouldn't say that in case somebody is a big fan of his. But so what we're trying to find is, what are the qualities that would make them an effective leader? And if they own the business, they're building a business, they have to find something within themselves. Now, I think there are three options for a founder when they get to the point where they're struggling. One is to do what the Tipico shareholders do, is to say, we're going to hand this business over to a professional chief executive, somebody who's got experience of growing a company. And that worked extremely well for them. But that's only one option. And it's full of risk because in most cases, the person that is brought in simply doesn't share the values or necessarily the vision of the founders. And there's a lot of tension around the founders letting go, because let's face it, it's their baby, and it's very hard to hand over your baby to somebody else. And that was true in the Tipico case. There was a lot of angst around the relationship with the CEO, which I helped to manage. But there are other options, and one is to kind of focus your role where it really adds the most value. So, for example, if the product and your vision for the product is where you really get traction as a leader, then maybe you need to bring in somebody else to run operations, or to run business development, or to be CEO, and you are part of the team, but you're not leading the overall company. So that's a second option that really works for some people. I think about someone like Reid Hoffman at LinkedIn, when he brought in a chief operating officer to sort of run the business with him and take over the day-to-day leadership and management of the company. And then the third option, I think, is the Miniclip story. It's basically the founder who basically realizes that they can't afford to hire anybody. The business is flatlining. The team he's got probably isn't good enough to do what's needed. And he asks for help. And in his case, he sort of looked at me and said, I guess I've got to learn how to do the CEO job better. And I said, yeah, I think so. Do you want some help with that? So that was the beginning of our working relationship, an acknowledgement that if he carries on the way he is currently leading the business, it's going to fail. And the other options were kind of shut down. But fortunately, Rob had so many of the qualities you would need to become a great chief executive. And it was my job to bring out those talents in him and help him to take the business on to the success it achieved.
Yeah, and for context for our guests, we'll not give you all the credit for helping them become a unicorn status startup,
No.
but you helped these two companies reach that $1 billion valuation with two very different stories. But you came in and assessed the situation and guided them to where they needed to go based on all the different variables.
Yeah. Would it help if I just said a little bit about the Miniclip story? I mean, for those who don't for those who don't know the company, Miniclip is a mobile gaming business, so better known for multiplayer games. Probably its most well-known game is 8-Ball Pool, which is sort of global phenomenon. Is my father the pool game with the most users and probably the best monetization in the world. Miniclip, for the first decade of its life in the noughties, and I wasn't involved in at all, was a web-based gaming company based on Rob's vision as a young man who started playing games in his bedroom when his parents thought he was revising for his exams. He had dyslexia, still does, so he didn't feel like school was for him, but he loved gaming. And his parents thought he was wasting his time up there. Actually, he was cooking up a plan to try and change the gaming world. And he had this sort of vision of free gaming platform. And that's what he built with very little money online. And he had incredible user numbers, but pretty awful monetization. It turned out in the end, he was very wise to do it the way he did it, but he couldn't have anticipated how it played out. Fast forward a few years, and it was a very famous speech by Steve Jobs when he launched the first iPhone. I think that was 2007, 2008, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment, for the next few years, gaming was switching from the web to mobile, and Miniclip's numbers were going into reverse. So by the time I met him towards the end of 2012, this is a company that is kind of flatlining. It had very modest revenue, about 30 million US dollars equivalent, and it was on the web. All the growth was on mobile. His management team were his kind of mates, people he trusted, rather than people who were hired because they were the best in that area. He was working out of a small office in the jewelry quarter of London. And when I was introduced to him, he was really worried about, where his business was going and what to do about it. And it was actually a bet by his HR director that if he met me, that he'd end up working with me. And she bet a month's salary on this, which is She never told me this at the time. I would have had kittens about that if I'd known. Anyway, we did work together eventually. He sort of wasn't sure whether he needed somebody like me because he immediately thought, this can't, how on earth can this possibly work? What does this guy know about mobile gaming? Which wasn't a lot, to be fair. But we started work together, and he invited me to one of his meetings, actually. And there was a team of, I think there were about 10 or 11 of them. And it was an all-day meeting, and they rattled through about 100 different actions. I nearly fell asleep, if I'm honest. It was so dull. And at the end of the day, he said, "What do you think? This isn't going to work, is it, Rob?" And his head of operations was an ex-army major from the British Army. He's very organized, and a very high integrity guy, but he had no idea how to run operations. So we had this moment when he said, "This isn't working, is it?" I said, "No, Rob, this isn't working." I think so. We sort of stood away from all of that and we said, what's required here? And we decided, number one, Rob needed to become the chief executive the business needed. So he's got to learn the CEO job. So we started work on that personally with him. Number two, he needed a team that was capable of moving this business into mobile and away from the web, because otherwise we were going to die. And number three, we needed a strategy for doing that this team was going to execute on. And it needed to be incredibly focused and simple and clear. So that's what we started doing. And every time we changed one of his team, painfully for him, because it was about bringing in people who were really capable and saying goodbye in many cases to people who you had a really quite deep personal relationship with, was a growth moment for Rob personally. But also it changed the trajectory of that business because we were all clear, we were all focused, we all knew what we were trying to do. And Miniclip, its growth just took off. And it was 2015, I mean, literally 2.5 years later, Tencent of China came in and offered him $1.5 billion for this business. And we didn't stop there just because suddenly we achieved the unicorn status, because that wasn't really the goal. Rob's goal was always his purpose of, making gaming available to everyone, and that just kept rolling. And now Miniclip was well capitalized, and Tencent didn't interfere in anything. It just provided access to more capital than Miniclip had ever seen, and started acquiring companies, transforming the business. I mean, today it's got revenue of over $1 billion. So it's an amazing story. The heart of the story is Rob's transition from being a founder who didn't know how to do the CEO job to being quite a brave chief exec who had a very clear vision for his business. I'll give you one little illustration of that, Eric. When I said to Rob, we need to commit, there's some goals to pivot to mobile, and we got to work out what those numbers look like. He said, I don't really believe in planning, Simon. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, the world is changing too fast. This is usually the argument that you get from a founder. I said, well, sure, okay. But how do I know, if I work for you, what you're committed to, where we're trying to get to? This is fine. Underneath all of that stuff about the world is changing too fast was actually an anxiety that if we commit to something and we don't achieve it, I'm going to look foolish. Mm-hmm. Behind most sort of things, there is a very human dimension. Managers, in my experience, fear two things: losing control or losing face. And if you can overcome those fears, you can become exceptional. And Rob was more than capable of doing that.
Best decision he ever made was pivoting to mobile. And
it was
maybe hiring you. No.
well, I definitely helped, but and he's said some nice things about me in the book. So yeah. I'm not saying that without some kind of reason. And we're still great friends today. And actually, one of the things that is a great credit to Rob is that all those people he let go, to use the euphemism for firing people, because he did it in the right way. And we were very sort of mindful about how he handled that. they're all still friends of his today. None of those
That's great.
relationships were terminated. They managed to retain the friendships that underpin the first phase of the growth of the company. Because, I mean, they really contributed a lot in the early days of Miniclip's life.
That's really great to hear. It's the founders and CEOs that take care of their shareholders and founding
Mm.
team members that I see are the most successful. They bring them along, or we have. I personally had a client, and we have a client that they had to pivot. They kept the original investors though, even though they pivoted to a completely different model and company, and those investors now have been taken care of, which goes back to the humanity aspect of building a business. It's more than just tech and AI and all that stuff. Now,
Yeah,
if you think of like the companies that didn't pivot or didn't adjust to the new decades to come, like Blockbuster couldn't figure out the monetization of the digital streaming. Now looking at AI, it's a similar path where you see all these different AI platforms and you're like, well, I don't want to do that because it might not work. Well, accounting is a great example. It's like, well, I don't want to use that accounting platform because QuickBooks works great and it's done everything we need to, but
yeah.
you know, for us at Adapt CFO company that I run on the side, which I'm trying to be a leader of as well, not doing the research in diving into those AI platforms will kill us. That's just the summary of it.
It's really nice the way you describe that. There is a kind of framework I use when I'm talking about how leaders need to find another gear, as I like to call it. It's called Three Horizons. So the idea behind it is that there are kind of three versions of the future that exist in the present. I'll try and be a bit clearer about this. So version one is what you call the Horizon One, which is the current business model. So there's the way you do things today, which consumes everybody's time and energy. You think about it, it's probably 80, 90% of energy is going into running today's business. And so they're all using QuickBooks or Sage or whatever accounting software. Or what's the latest one?
Zero's a
Zero. Yeah, Zero.
NetSuite.
That's right. We use Zero as well. So you got people living in that world. Now
Yeah,
we know that that is going to decline. This is a question of how fast it's going to decline and what's going to replace it. So if you spend 90 or 100% of your time just living in that world, you're just living on borrowed time. So that brings in the other horizon. So horizon three is your long-term vision for the future. Now, this is like, we can reimagine the business we're in the future. I have no idea what that looks like in accounting terms, but you can see why if you were Uber, you would reimagine the business without drivers in some
hmm
time horizon that is actually not that far off. So they would be investing in sort of driverless vehicles today because they know that their future is going to depend on understanding that and testing that and on working with that idea. And then you've got Horizon 2, which is the entrepreneurial horizon, which is the bridge between 1 and 3. And that horizon is all about, I prefer to call it the founder horizon. It's like experiments. It's about finding ways of adapting your business so that you're ready for that future. It's testing things. This is exactly what a founder does, right? You do sort of experiments and you make them as cheap as possible because you know that a lot of them are going to fail. So the last thing you want to do is have a gold-plated experiment that fails. You want something that's cheap as chips, and if it looks interesting, then you invest a bit more in it. You try it on another level, right? So, and
that's
that
great.
requires a founder mode. Now, for me, founders are almost always in founder mode. And the problem for them is to learn when the business is scalable to also focus on Horizon One to keep a repetitive business model running in a way that delivers sustainable returns for their investors and for themselves. Whereas for managers, you have the opposite problem. They haven't ever found founder mode. and they live in a world, in a corporate world, where people don't take risks, they don't want to fail, they don't do experiments. But big corporations need to learn how to make experiments. Take Amazon. I mean, Jeff Bezos has never lost founder mode. That is what is it? Trillions of dollars Amazon
Yeah.
must be worth these days. It's got more businesses than you could possibly imagine in it. I doubt if he could name them all. And what he's doing is constantly experimenting at the frontier of his business. So that, as an investor, that gives me huge confidence that that business is going to have a great future. It's the ones that optimize. I mean, Blockbuster was really good at retail. It just completely missed the digital pivot, right?
So is it Horizon 2 that Amazon is staying in? Do you stay in one horizon, or are you across the board,
So
1 and 2?
that's that's a great question, but it's a great question because actually I think it's like every day you want to make sure as a chief executive the Horizon One is running well. Every day you should be asking the question, are we making the right bets on the future? Are we experimenting? Are we looking at those areas that are going to be the future, even if we don't know exactly what form that is going to take? So for many businesses, that will involve some kind of AI pilots and things like that.
Yeah.
And Horizon 3, you may not spend any time on it today, but maybe this week you might spend a bit of time talking to people who are in a very different business from yours, or talking to your board, or just researching what's going on in the world. So you have somewhere at the back of your mind, you're starting to think about where the future lies. So I think for me, great leadership is this ability to change gear, to move between these horizons, and to recognize when you need to be all in on one of them or when you need to be balancing between them.
So how did you end up in this world of coaching founders and CEOs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been in it for quite a long time now, as you can probably guess from the wrinkles. And so I think we worked out when we were chatting before the call that I did my MBA a few years before you were born, which is a
I'm
bit
getting
scary.
wrinkles too. I got
Don't
some. I
worry,
got
there's more incoming, trust me.
I got plenty of gray hair. I started getting grays when I was like 25, and it's compounded.
Well, well, I've stopped counting, and I think it gets to a point when you stop worrying about it as well, which is the most liberating thing. So
Yeah.
how did I get into this? Well, I started to get serious about my career when I chose to do an MBA. I basically had just enough money to put myself through business school based on what I'd done previously, and I went all in on it, made that sort of strategic bet. And this is at a time when MBAs were not such an obvious move. It's
Yeah.
before they became like, you know, two a penny. And
And
I
now
had loads.
now it's going back to the same, not being relevant anymore. Colleges, I don't know if you
Now
saw,
they,
but universities are offering discounts for MBAs.
yeah, that's probably right actually. And there are in some ways good reasons for that. And I don't think the MBA sort of education world has kept pace with the realities of the world that most of us practitioners live in. So, but that's another story. So I did my MBA, and then I had loads of job offers, and I chose to work for a British conglomerate. It was called Thorn EMI. You'll recognize the EMI part of the music business, but there were
Hmm.
other businesses in that group. Conglomerates don't exist these days. You might have to explain that to your audience, but they were like dinosaurs that roamed the earth in those days. And the interesting thing was I was given a lot of freedom to develop managers and run training programs for managers. That was sort of my area of great interest. So it's quite early on I started doing this kind of work. So I worked with them, and I had a lot of training for myself. Then there was also a time of great corporate generosity and largesse around training for growing managers. So I had coaching training. I learned how to use psychometrics, all sorts of things. From there, I went to join a consulting company called YSC, which is today, I think it's the leading corporate psychology firm in the world. They're based in London, and I learned a lot about getting underneath the skin of people and what makes them tick and how to help them to grow. From there, I got hired by Ericsson, who were a client of ours, to help transform their business. They were Ericsson, telecoms company, Swedish. They were just getting to the end of digitalizing the UK telephone network, and the world was going to mobile networks, and they wanted somebody in the HR seat who could help that transformation, and that was my job, which is to come in and help them to transform. It was really a massive challenge. We had about 2 years to do it, and we didn't have the right people, the right equipment. We didn't have the right anything. So it was like there was no roadmap. We had to figure it all out. Made so many mistakes and learned so much. It was an incredible time in my career, but also exhausting. And at the end of it, I decided I wanted to set up my own business. I was kind of fed up with working for others. And my wife and I decided to set up a business. And I was hoping to start a family at the time. And it was this moment when Jane and I, we moved house into a bigger house that we could ill afford, probably. We had a horrible mortgage. We just had our first child, which turned out to be last and child as well. God bless her. She's a single. What do you call it? A single child, an only child,
Yeah.
not
Only child.
a single parent and only children. So I got this photograph of the three of us in the kitchen somewhere, and they've both got pink cheeks, and I look kind of white and worried because we just set up our own business. But it worked out, and we grew that company over about 27 years, and I'm chairman of it today. I was chief executive for most of the life of the company, and it's still trading. I've sold about 70% of it to the current CEO. So that's my story.
That's great. You mentioned you had to scrap for pennies or dollars to get your MBA. Did you come from money? It sounds like you didn't.
No, well, my dad was an orphan, and he has a sort of really grim start in life, and he served in the Royal Navy throughout the Second World War, and was a headmaster at school. So you don't get rich doing any of that. And
Yeah.
my mum, sort of very talented lady, but she didn't really work outside to earn money. So the inheritance was small. So I definitely didn't come from money. I mean, and I think in a way, my love of education and belief in it and learning sort of probably started from that single moment when I said, I'm going to just invest in myself. And I think it's been my learning and growth that has driven me throughout my life, really. I really encourage founders and leaders of all kinds just to grapple with their own, develop a mindset around always trying to make yourself stronger. Invest more in yourself than in your business, and your business will benefit enormously from it. So, and that's a lot of what the book is about, is how to do
Yeah.
that practically.
Yeah, I remember reading in your book about that. So how did you get that ambition to want to learn and grow, right? Because like not everyone wants to pick up a book and educate themselves. Why, what was it about, was it genetic? Like, do you have any explanation for it?
So this is a good point to sort of say there are three things that are typically blockages to people's growth. And I'm always looking out for these in when I'm coaching a client and I'm getting to know them. One is, do they really know themselves well enough? Because if you don't know yourself and you don't know your strengths and you don't know your weaknesses, you can't really improve. You don't have a realistic sense of self. And if you can't improve yourself based on that, you can't help anybody else either. So I had, through the work that I was doing, and I've always been very interested to understand myself and what makes me tick. So that's number one. Number two is motivation. Do they really want this? I mean, one of the reasons I put myself through business school is because I was running out of options. I didn't know what to do. And this was about investing in myself and my own potential. I figured by the end of it, I wouldn't know exactly what to do, but I have a much better idea than I did now. And that
Mhm.
turned out to be verifiably true. And the third blockage is I don't know what to do differently. Even if I'm motivated and I understand myself, do I know how to be different? Do I know how to put that into practice? And a lot of my coaching work is helping people to figure out, it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to become a better CEO. It's quite another thing to actually put that into practice and actually do that. So, so did I answer your question? I mean, what really drove me to want to do this? I think my father's attitude towards education shaped me a lot. I mean, he was a headmaster, for God's sake. Let's think about that. And also, he was 18 years old in 1939. Now, you know, the Nazis tried to invade Britain in 1940. He was already at war when he should have been at university studying, but Hitler had other ideas for him. So he always, I think, wished he could have gone to university and studied because it would have suited him. He had a good brain and he would have loved that. So I think for me growing up, he just wanted me so much to have a good education, always encouraged me to focus on my own growth as a person and as a human being.
Yeah, it sounds like you saw him. And not only did he tell you what to do, he guided you to that, but he also influenced you. And I think that's one of the most important aspects of learning is following someone by influence, seeing that he was an orphan that grew into a headmaster. That's, why can't anyone become successful when, when they
Yeah,
have a bad situation, or though it looks like a bad situation.
yeah, and it was a, you know, it's interesting. Now we're talking about my dad, but whenever I asked him about his early life, because he was part of the very first foster scheme in the world. It was run by a charity called Bernardo's, and it's a very famous charity here in the UK. And he he was moved from family to family because he was so difficult. And he remember when you asked him, he's passed away now in 2010, but when you asked him about his early life, what he remembers of it, he used to say things like, "I remember spitting a lot to gain attention and
Mm.
being cold a lot of the time." So, I mean, and then, 'cause I don't know how close it came to him not making it, but I know without the charity, he would have struggled. And he went on to influence so many lives for the better. He sort of fought for his country, went on to guide lots of young people and educate them. He was an incredible headmaster, an incredible dad. I don't know how he did all of that on the back of that start in life, but I'm obviously very proud of him. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about him like this. And he definitely inspired me to pursue my own growth as a person and to try and show up with the same integrity and clarity that he always did.
That's great. That's amazing to know that you can be a man of integrity when you start your life, spitting and misbehaving and being a juvenile per se. I personally in middle school had 21 suspensions. I was always in the principal's office. I didn't have a chance. I was just a bad kid, and I got to high school and I got better and better and better. And not to talk too much about myself, but my mentality has always been to improve. And I've received awards where I was at the bottom and I was able to get the award for the most improved. Or in football, I was last on the team to join, but I ended up becoming the captain of the team my senior year. And I think that's
Perfect.
important, having that ambition to improve. Now, you mentioned the third blockage being putting putting the CEO role into practice. Is there a solution? Is it deeper than just what we can fit on this podcast, or is there a way for CEOs to get hit the ground running and put it into practice?
There's a lot to unpack in that, but I mean, there's a chapter in the book about the CEO role, and in that chapter, I talk a bit about that. These are there are about seven things that every CEO needs to grapple with, and then you need to say, okay, in this business, because every business is different, what are the absolute fundamentals of the role in order to grow this tech firm or to build this consultancy business or to build this retail business? What makes an exceptional CEO in these different sectors or at different stages in the life of the business is pretty different. The thing that all CEOs have in common is they have to take responsibility for the overall performance of the business and its future. And very few people are actually prepared for that. Because if in large corporations, people grow up in sort of silos or in a functionally blueprinted organization or in regions, and they don't often have a really good track to grow and prepare chief executives. And of course, founders start with their own vision and their own energy and their own sort of blinkers. So what do you call those? Blinders, I think you call them. For the things the
Blinders.
horses wear, yeah, blinders. There are always things that you don't see or that you don't put as much energy and focus on. So a lot of what I try to do is help the client to take those things off and actually see what they don't see. Maybe an example would help because I'm coaching a young man in his 20s who's showed remarkable vision. He's building a business in the mental health space using technology, of course, and because there's an enormous gulf between the mental health problem and the number of people who need help and the number of therapists and people available to help them. Every country has a problem with this. It's a global problem. And so what they're doing is building something using technology that actually makes it scalable. The solution is scalable. And he's remarkable, such vision. He's got a grasp of the technology and how to do that. He's got lots of churn in his team. And it's a real sign that there are parts of his job that he pays a lot less attention to. And when he does pay attention to it, it's often a bit misguided, or it's based on his idea of what a rational human being should be thinking. If I say this to them, they will obviously understand it. Or if I incentivize him in this way, that will motivate him. Oh, sorry, mate, that's not how people are wired. We're all a bit different, and it's your job to get to know the people in your team and figure out how to get the best out of them. And that's sort of not part of his mindset at the moment. So we're working on that, and it's broadening his thinking about his role as a leader of that company. And I think the more we work on, the more we'll build a team that's more sustainable, and we'll see a lot less churn. And then people will be focused on those roles for longer. They'll make more progress, and the business will start to perform. So you can't. The thing about a CEO is you just got to keep an eye on the investors. You got to keep an eye on your team and make sure that they're, you know, fit for the future as well as the present. You've got to keep an eye on your customer base. You've got to think about you're the ambassador for the company when you need to talk about it in the public sphere. So many dimensions to this role, and if you neglect a few of them or one of them, it will usually come back to bite you. So one of the exercises I often do with CEOs is to compare your diary with your vision. And it's a very crude metric. But when you do that, there's a remarkable amount of mismatch that usually occurs. I mean, just had one client who did this exercise, and I said, what are your top 2 or 3 priorities for your business? And he named 3 things, and they are all quite time critical, and they are all going to make or break the journey the company is on. And I said, let's look at your diary. And he looked at his diary for the last 3 weeks, I think it was. And something like 15% of his time was on those things. And I'm a coach, so I don't jump to this, see, told you. That's not my job. My question for him is, so what does that tell you about what your real priorities are? And what does it tell you about the chances of successfully executing on those 3 priorities? What's the message you're sending to your team? And I didn't need to say any more. And he's redesigning his priorities, his diary, and he's thinking about how he changes the way he spends his time. So you're kind of looking for leverage in any situation as a coach that would actually help the client really move things forward. It's very helpful to start with, more concrete things about what you want to really achieve over the next period.
Yeah, my understanding is that it should be the inverse. Instead of 15%, it should be 85% that you're doing you should, 80 to 90% of the top priorities you should be focusing your time on, and the 10 to 15% is what you should be doing those those other tasks that you can't avoid, those operational things.
Yeah, and find other ways of getting them done. There are always efficiency opportunities and gains in using technology or hiring somebody who can take some of those things off your plate, or redesigning your senior team so that you've got less on your plate. There are all sorts of things that are available to you. The key thing is not to ignore the problem until it's too late. Is actually to see the problem coming and now before it becomes a problem. I mean, I think bad hiring and not really building a team, two of the biggest problems because they are so expensive to
Yeah.
fix. The cost of getting it wrong, the wasted time, and then the churn, and then the rehire, and then the integration of the new person. All of that is all consuming, and it's resented by a lot of CEOs. And I said, well, if you did a better job in the first place, all of this would be unnecessary. You don't need to put yourself through this. There are better ways of hiring. There are better ways of integrating people. Yeah.
Do you think that it's the same situation when you buy something at a store where that's on sale or it's cheaper and it ends up breaking in a couple weeks because you wanted to save some money?
Could be there's a metaphor there somewhere, I think, about, I mean, I always think when I go out and buy a product, the cheapest product is probably the one that it is only cheap in the short run.
Yeah,
And as soon
like you
as
get
you
what you
look at,
pay for.
you kind of do. Sometimes you get ripped off, so let's not shy away from that reality.
Right,
But
right.
generally speaking, well-made quality products are going to last years. I mean, I bought a jacket here in the UK, and I, I forgot I bought it because I ordered it, and it was like a year to deliver it because it was being personally made, and they only make to order, and they don't make to stock. And my wife said, "How much did you pay for this thing?" I said, "It was about 300 quid, you know." So, and she was like, "What? How good is this jacket?" And I got it and I put it on, and she just felt it, and she said, "That is amazing. It is beautiful. It's a beautifully made garment. All the materials, the zips, the buttons, the cut, the design, everything is perfect." And I said, "I love this so much. I think I'll be wearing it when I'm 75 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's going to last years." And I think we've lost touch with that idea. We live in an age where people want things to be cheap, and they don't last. So yes, I do think there is a bit of an analogy for this. Do it well, hire well, build a strategy well, do it right first time. Don't waste your time. Don't
Yeah.
waste your money.
There's some CEOs, Ruben. I think it's Fanatics is the company. It's a billion-dollar company here in
Mhm.
the US. And he says he spends the majority of his time hiring. He's just always on calls with people interviewing. And I think that's the one dilemma that a lot of CEOs and operators have. Let's say leaders, because that's the conversation we're having. It's putting the money up for the right people and not being
Yeah,
budget or cost conscious. Of course, for me as a finance person, I always say, well, don't overspend, but it's just like buying a house. You're gonna bid on a house that you want, and you're gonna spend a premium on it because
yeah.
that's the right option.
So there is I mean, just on hiring,
Yeah.
just if in case anybody's listening to this thinking, so what's the tip for hiring? I just want to say Google did this massive piece of research on hiring, and because they used to have like 20 people or something meeting each candidate, and they sort of did some research on it, and they found out that after four, it was a complete waste of time. The management menus going into all of that extra conversation was a complete waste of
Yeah.
time. So, and no one person could beat four. So, in other words, everybody individually is pretty bad at hiring. Even if they think they're good at it, they're not. But four is the optimum number. So, that's one thing. The second thing is we rely too much on interviews. Interviews are very important because they allow the client, the hiree, the recruit, to ask questions and talk to you and get to know you. So it's very important, but it's one of the weaker tools in the armory. The most important one is to give people a work test of some kind. In other words, if you're hiring a consultant, get them to do some consulting. If you're hiring somebody to make presentations and pitches to your clients, get them to make a pitch for you. I mean, you'll soon see what they're like. It's amazing to me how often people miss that. And you should use a range of things, not just a singular thing when you're doing good hiring. And I've got one client who's building a convention, and they're called Ignazia, and they a fabulous business. They're basically, close your ears for this part. They're basically trying to defend Italian hospitality and tradition from the an invasion of American hotel chains, because every time that happens, Italian properties are losing their identity, their culture, and their uniqueness. Who wants to go and stay in a Hilton in Siena? You want to stay in an Italian, a palazzo with, you
Yeah.
why would you travel and then want to recreate your life somewhere else? So basically, he's this founder who's an inspirational character. He's basically trying to build defensibility into the Italian hotel business, and he's got this flagship property called Borgo Ignazia, which is they had the G7 international meeting there recently. It's now kind of world famous, and he's also trying to offer other great Italian hotels a chance to be part of his kind of orbit and add value to them and help them to do various things really well, including hiring and including culture building. And he was struggling with hiring himself. His team kept somehow disappointing for him. And we've started to use a designed process using psychological testing and other tools. We have modeled exactly what behaviors are going to be critical for the culture of Ignazia to persist throughout all of the properties that he is acquiring or investing in. And we're already using that process, and it is already changing the sort of performance of his senior team. I mean, they're more expensive, but they're so much better, the hires that are starting to emerge from that process. And that will have sustainably good results. I don't
That's
have
great.
to guess. I know this is going to work. It's
Yeah.
science.
Well, you invest in it, you invest in the culture. It's so interesting that they're doing. I mean, that's just communities across the board, micro communities across the world have been influenced or become, I don't know, call it Americanized, or, they've lost that sense of where the original culture
The sense of
originated.
place. Yeah.
Yes.
And he's interesting because he just says, I mean, so Borgo Ignazio is in Puglia in the south of Italy, in this,
Hmm.
the heel of the boot of Italy. And he doesn't even talk about Italian culture. He talks about Puglian culture. So the people who work there are all local people. The food is Puglian food. So it's very carefully crafted menus that demonstrate the sort of glorious food of that region of Italy, and all the ingredients are local, they're artisan. You know, it's not cheap, but the it has integrity. You're basically saying if you kind of say that your culture is this, you would run right through that business and you would find it in everything. It's like open it up and you'd find, oh yeah, this is Ignazio.
Wow.
And if you're serious about culture, that's how far you're prepared to go, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I could talk to you about culture and food and travel all day long, but I want to know about
Yeah.
the time when you personally were under pressure. We ask all of our podcast guests of a day or a situation where you weren't sure what tomorrow looked like. It could be dark, could be unsettling, and
Mm.
and what that looked like. Take us there.
Okay, so the thing that immediately comes to mind from personally was when we were growing Value Partnership as a leadership consulting business, we're sort of competing against top level consultancies around the world. And I felt the pressure to be developing new clients all the time as we grew the team. and I would lose sleep over it. And we go through various economic cycles, and it was brutally hard. I have a vivid sense of having some sleepless nights about the size of the team and whether or not our pipeline was good enough, which of these leads are going to convert. The sort of sense of felt pressure of that, and things hinging on one or two leads and not having any real control over that. Some of those days were very stressful. And this is at a time when I am traveling a lot for my work. So I would regularly be in France working. I had a young child. I'm waiting at Charles de Gaulle Airport for a flight back in the evening. And I'm just counting the minutes as the plane sits on the tarmac, and I'm wanting to get home to see my child and say goodnight to her before she's crashed out and quite rightly asleep in her bed. Are those days, I love them in a way. I don't miss them now. I look back on that and I wonder how on earth I did it, if I'm honest with you, Eric. It was pretty stressful at times.
Yeah, you can't get those days back.
No, you can't. Those moments. I was just to get there before she went to bed was probably my success measure. Yeah.
Does she hold it against you now?
No, because actually, in one of the reasons I created Value Partnership with my wife is because I wanted to be a real dad, not a corporate dad. I
So you
wanted
made
to
it
be
home.
there for her. So I made it. I made it home more nights than I did, and I gradually designed my life so that I was spending a lot less time away on doing programs. That's one of the reasons in the end I pivoted to doing a lot more coaching. It involved a lot less travel than running sort of 3-4 day programs and workshops with people, international managers in all sorts of weird and wonderful places around the world. So yeah, I mean, running your own business and not having investors, love that. The only pressure you experience is the pressure you put on yourself.
Right. You can scale as far as, the amount of time you put into it. You reap what you sow, right?
It's a choice. It's a choice at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you tell your clients no, and how do you set that expectation?
I'm busy. I think you basically say, I mean, after it was quite a lot, I was very much in demand. I'm still in demand, but I only had so many hours, and it was quite easy to say, well, if you want that, and if you want it on that timescale, it can't be me. It's a reminder when you're a founder, especially when you're in a business like consulting, is I'm not scalable. I only have so many hours in the week. The culture of my business is scalable. That's a lot of what I work with founders on, is to consider the culture is how they scale themselves. So I would just say no or postpone it.
Yeah.
And that was
Just
fine. Most clients are quite willing to accept that. If they want you, they're going to have to wait.
yeah, I think that's fair. Most people, they think that if a client wants you and wants your time, that you need to stand to attention and answer their call. And I also like to set expectations with them right away. Hey, after
That's
six
good.
o'clock, I don't take calls. On weekends, I'm not taking calls. Sorry,
Yep.
my family's more important than you.
And if a client doesn't accept that, they're not the right client for you.
Exactly. Absolutely.
You just have to work out where your boundaries are. And I think when you're younger and less experienced and you're trying to grow a company and you're anxious about your pipeline, you are a bit more biddable. You're a bit more
Yeah.
inclined to bend all of those rules because and maybe that's okay, maybe that's right. But I've got to a point where I just say no, I don't need to
Yeah.
do that. And it's one of the nicer things about getting a bit older is that you kind of are very clear. There's
More
this thing in the
mentality.
book, early in the book, I talk about intelligence, and I think you might have
Mhm.
read that bit. There's you in your 20s and 30s, your fluid intelligence is peaking. In other words, you see things and you very quickly understand or can see a solution, or you think you can. That's the difference. When you get older, that declines and there's nothing you can do about it. It's a bit like your VO2 max if you do training.
Mhm.
Sorry, it's going to go downhill. You can't do anything about it. There are certain things you can do, but not that. Now, the good news for people my age or people worrying about that is that something else grows and it's called crystallized intelligence. And crystallized is this accumulated knowledge and the ability to see patterns between things and to be able to teach and to write. So it's probably why I ended up writing a book, because it's about connecting the dots between things and seeing the relationship between things. And crystallized intelligence is a rough approximation for wisdom, I guess. But it's why sometimes older teachers are better teaching than younger teachers. And it's why, if you want to write, you've just got so much more experience to inject into your writing, for example.
Yeah, the goals that you have in life shift in the when you're younger, obviously, and this is separate from fluid and crystallized, just the responsibilities are different. In the early days, you want to pay your bills, you need to pay your bills. You can't say no to that
You
client
do.
because you can't afford it. Then
Yeah.
later on, you have a little bit of flexibility. Also having faith that, like, if this is the wrong client, there's going to be
Mm.
another one that's even better, and that's okay. But yeah, I really enjoyed hearing the difference in the fluid intelligence versus the crystallized. And you've obviously crystallized your knowledge into this book, Founder's Legacy, which it's a breakdown of what 50 different, tips or tricks to on how to become a leader.
Yeah.
It's 50, right? Game-changing lessons, leadership lessons for building a great business. I'm a little bit in. I'm looking forward to reading the rest. But this has been a ton of fun. I want to dive into a couple rapid fire questions before I let you go.
Okay, go for it.
What is growth
I
under
won't, I won't be
pressure?
as I
Yeah,
won't be so fluidly intelligent, so it
yeah.
might take me a bit longer to answer them.
It's crystallized. You don't have to think about it. It's there.
Go on then, let's see. Go
Yeah.
for
What
it.
does growth under pressure mean to you?
It's about being resilient and figuring out how to keep the pressure manageable.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Another podcast, book, or a YouTube video that you suggest to others out there trying to become a leader.
Oof, what would I recommend? I'm going to be very cautious about this one. I mean, I listen to lots of different podcasts. I'm listening to a lot of political podcasts at the moment because I'm very interested in what's going on in the world in that sense. But
It's a lot happening.
there is an awful lot happening, and some of it is a bit scary. I
Yeah.
don't know if your listeners will have come across Diary of a CEO, but Stephen Bartlett.
Yeah.
It's a very kind of well-known podcast now. I don't recommend all of it, but there are some quite interesting interviews on there. I would focus more on his business leader interviews because he's smart in the business world, less on some of the geopolitics and stuff like that because his questions always seem a bit naive. Sorry, this is quick fire. I'm giving you long answers. Apologies.
Yeah. No, it's great. No, that's really good. What is an underrated trait in leadership?
Humility.
That one's great.
It's it's in the whole chapter in the book on humility. It's so underrated because if you're humble, you accept what you don't know. You accept your weaknesses. You are more inclined to listen to others. You're more inclined to surround yourself with people who might even be better than you. You're undefended about all of that. And as a result, it's all gain. And nobody talks about it. But I love a bit of humility. It's not very trendy at the moment, but it'll come back in fashion, I reckon.
I hope it does. Humility is absolutely underrated. Okay, last one. What is one thing founders should stop doing immediately?
Annual appraisals. Maybe they don't do them. What should founders stop doing?
What is
Um,
an annual appraisal? Is that a budget?
no, it's a sort of once a year talking to each member of your team and giving them some feedback. You should view the year as 52 short sprints and always be talking to your team. But
Mm,
the other thing is, so founders sometimes confuse ownership with leadership and they try to control everything. So maybe a better answer to what should they stop doing is trying to control everything. Just surround yourself with great people and let them go.
excellent. Simon, this was a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Where can our audience connect with you or learn more about your work?
Probably the best thing is to find me on LinkedIn, and Value Partnership has a website and they can get some links to the book and some other resources on there. The book is on Amazon. It's also on Spotify and Audible if people like listening. I read the whole thing in a studio over 3-4 days, so I'd love it if people download that. And if you like my voice, then do that. If you don't like my voice, don't do that because it's me.
You got two options. Well, I already got the book. It's a solid book. There's a
There you go.
lot of knowledge in there. I'm also going to order the audio book because I want to listen to it as well. But thank you so much for your time, Simon. I'm excited to stay in touch and continue the conversation.
Me too, Eric. And I would love to hear from anybody. If they just want to reach out and ask me a question or chat or follow, then I'd love to hear from them.
Excellent. Is there an email or contact that you prefer?
No, just maybe DM me on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. Just go on LinkedIn, connect, send me a message. And if you like, you've got my email address. You can put that on the podcast as well.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, Simon. Till next time. Cheers.
All the best.
And that's a wrap on another episode of Growth Under Pressure. I'm your host, Eric Josovitz, and I hope today's conversation gave you practical insights you can apply to your own growth journey. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with another founder, operator, or leader who'd find it valuable. We publish new episodes every other Thursday featuring conversations with people that are building, scaling, and leading under pressure. And let me know in the comments what stood out most from today's episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, keep pushing, keep growing, and I'll see you on the next episode of Growth Under Pressure.